Well, thank you all for coming. My name's Haydn Belfield. I'm a research associate and academic project manager at the Center for the Study of Existential Risk, and I have been for the last 7 years. But it's not about me today, it's about these two wonderful people. So Nandini, who's the executive director of the Existential Risk Alliance, ERA, and Cecil, who is the coordinator of the ILINA program. And we're going to hear a lot more about both of those acronyms in a lot of depth today. But we're going to be talking about personal journeys into this field, kind of a bit about the kind of specifics and nuts and bolts, but also just getting into what makes the two of you tick and what has brought you into this field. So we thought that we could try and kick off with a bit of a sort of, what makes you hopeful? Because this is can be a pretty grim set of topics, the end of the world, the collapse of civilization. So yeah, what makes you hopeful? What is a kind of hopeful vision that you have for the future, even though you both kind of work on these quite grim topics?
So I actually have a scenario that I sort of like to go ahead with just to help set the scene. So imagine, if you will, that you're standing on a scenic overlook, gazing out at a vibrant, sprawling city, one that represents all of humanity's highest achievements throughout history. Below, you see gleaming skyscrapers, bustling transit lines, parks filled with people from every corner of the world living and working in harmony. Now zoom your perspective outward, gaining altitude until the entire globe comes into view. As you look down upon the earth, take in all the 8 billion souls that currently call this planet home and reflect on all of the ingenuity, creativity, compassion, and toil that generations have poured into making humanity and building modern civilization to what it is today. From the first factories of the Industrial Revolution, to the moon landing, to the smartphones in every pocket in this room, humanity has already come so far. But hold this breathtaking panorama in your mind for just a bit longer and allow your gaze to drift towards the future, decades, centuries from now. There, the scene wavers and blurs as uncertainty takes hold. For while the present offers clarity, the choices we make today will echo across generations to shape whether our descendants look upon a world nurturing hope or confronting hardships on a scale never seen before. Today, right now, we stand at a precipice. You may think a scenario with such uncertainty sounds like science fiction, but as any of the engineers in the room will attest, which is maybe a few of you, even seemingly minor decisions can have unforeseen impacts, especially when it comes to complex systems such as the whole human race. It is with this immense responsibility in mind that I founded the Existential Risk Alliance, or ERA for short. Existential risks are potential events that could lead to the permanent and complete extinction of human race. At their core, these are not just large-scale risks. They are unique in their global and irreversible nature. It is akin to a system failure, but on a scale where the system in question is our entire human civilization. And that's what makes me want to work on mitigating X risks.
Love it. That was great. I love that. I love the zooming out and imagining, and zooming out kind of in space and in time, and just imagining. I love that. Okay, well, I wonder if you could kick off maybe by saying a bit about ERA and where it's come from and what the plans are. And we're gonna make this practical. We're gonna have a plug right at the beginning of the conversation for various applications that people can do, and a plug at the end. So if you could also mention how people can get involved.
So ERA actually has applications open for a summer research fellowship program right now, working on AI safety and governance. We really have no prerequisites that you have to have this qualification or you need to have done all of these things. We only care about supporting the best people to work on AI X risk. So that's my plug of sort of call for action. But in terms of where ERA came from, so I started what was previously called the Cambridge Existential Risk Initiative in my first year at undergrad. It was lockdown, I was home, and I was just thinking that nobody is doing something about this, and if not me, then who will? So that was really the motivation in getting Kerry off the ground. And from then on, it's been the amazing people who have kept it ticking along. But Yeah, so we are a summer research fellowship program. We bring together fellows from all career stages for 10 weeks in Cambridge, working on various extras. This year we are focusing just on AI, but previously we have worked on biosecurity, extreme climate change, nuclear risk. Yeah.
That was great. I think, and do you want to do a similar? Sure. Yeah, please.
Okay, yeah. So what makes me hopeful? Let's see. Sort of connected to what Nandini has said, that's maybe a long view of history. So rather than just focusing on what's going on now, like looking at the history of humanity and how that's been. And I mean, it's obviously important not to romanticize how much good has, because some people have benefited over others, but by and large, I think there's some proof of progress, right? Yeah, so that, and the other thing that motivates me a lot is being around people who are also very motivated and seem not to be affected by, well, when I'm with them, seem to be less affected by the downcast situations in the world. Yeah, so those are the two things that motivate me the most. Okay, so yeah, I'm the coordinator of the ILINA program. The ILINA program is you could call it a research program. So what we do is we help African candidates who just finished undergrad to get into the space. So we run a fellowship where they research certain questions, and we also run a seminar where we like just have classes with them. So we it's Africa wide. So we take candidates from everywhere in Africa. The only catch is you have to be an African. That's the only catch. Yeah, because obviously the idea is the opportunities are fewer and it's more difficult. I mean, when I got into the space, I was lucky. I got into a good fellowship, but like it's hard when you're not in these kinds of places to get into this fellowship. So the idea was to sort of create something that can start you off. And we have our applications open.
Are you intending to focus this year on a particular set of subjects? Yeah.
Okay, I mean, we have more room for more areas, so we do AI governance. We take people who work on technical AI questions. We take people who work on biorisk, and we take people who work on global health, although the bar for global health is a bit high. And catastrophic climate change, although the bar there is also a bit high. Yeah. And so that's what we do primarily, but we also do some internal research.
Okay, great. So that's the plug out of the way, and tell people to apply right away. I was wondering maybe if you could both kind of mention, they've been running a few years now, the program. Like, is there a particular kind of piece of research that one of your fellows has done, or something that they've gone on to do that you think is particularly interesting or particularly kind of inspiring?
Yeah, so we've only done 2 versions of ILINA. That's 2021, 2022, and then 2023. So last year we had someone from Chad. His name is Sianka. He's a truly remarkable person. You might think, I used to think Africa's fairly similar, but not true at all. Chad's really tough. To give you a sense of how tough it is, he was, when he was still in the fellowship, there was a coup, and like just electricity stuff. It's tough. Anyway, Sianka, he did a really great project when he was with us. Hopefully, the paper is going to come out soon. Then he was in Mexico City recently for the AI Futures Fellowship, and I think there's another paper coming out from there. I'm very hopeful about what he's going to do. Yeah, I'm like really, really hopeful. He's going to do important work. Yeah, so that's Sianka. I mean, we have Jacob Ayang, who's Ghanaian, who I didn't mention we also are interested in animal welfare. I didn't mention that, yeah, but Jacob Ayang, who's Ghanaian, did a really great project on so cage-free chicken farming in Africa, and how to encourage farmers to get there, despite the commercial pressures.
Yeah.
And the paper's coming out soon. He did that last year, so the paper's coming out soon. It was a widespread survey, and yeah, so I think he's also going to do really important work.
Yeah.
We're kind of young, so we can't see how far people are going.
That already sounds pretty
But yeah,
good.
but I
Pretty
think
cool, yeah.
I'm feeling good about them. Yeah.
How about you, Nandini?
Yeah, I think, ERA has been running for quite a few years, so there are many pieces of work that I can point to, which were like, how did you manage to do this in 8 weeks? Like, did you sleep at home? But I think what I find most inspiring is seeing how fellows come into the program having a certain worldview, and then they spend 8 weeks in Cambridge and learn from each other and go out of it thinking that, okay, now I can actually make a difference. And that change, that counterfactual impact, where they come in being like, okay, maybe this is for me, but they go out thinking, having that conviction that this is for me. That's the inspiring thing for me. And one case who comes to my mind is Claire. She was a fellow this summer. She worked a lot on climate and AI intersection before coming into ERA. But she joined us as an AI governance fellow and spent 8 weeks learning about AI governance, did a project which was published on UN's website. We matched her up with mentors, and hopefully ERA added some value to her. But just her as a human being, she was so inspiring and just committed to what she wants to be doing. And now then she went on to work at Simon Institute for Long-Term Governance, and now she is a research scholar at GovAI. So to think that we took somebody who had just finished at a master's program and gone all the way to a place where she's probably working on policy briefs now, which are going directly to the UK government. That is an inspiring journey to think about. But at the same time, there are people who come in thinking that, maybe X-Risk is a bit too weird for me, or I don't know why I should care about this as much. And then they leave with the conviction that, okay, actually, this is maybe the top priority for our generation. So that is the inspiring arc for me personally.
I love that. And I love the way that you both speak about the people that in the programs. It's just, it's so nice and kind of warm. But I mean, I think you raise a good point that it did used to be, pretty unusual. The thing I really like to look at is this. YouGov did a survey of the British population, and they asked what are the things most likely to destroy the world, and some of the ones at the top, nuclear, climate change, and then way down at the very bottom between an alien invasion and a religious rapture. Was AI, and now it's become a much more big topic of conversation. But yeah, so existential risk used to be this pretty small field. How did you first kind of encounter existential risk and global catastrophic risk? How did you both encounter it for the first time, and what kind of first got the hook into you? What kind of got you interested in it?
For me, I have always been driven by impact. Even as a child, I wanted to do, okay, how can I help others the most, mentality that I want to do the most good that I can, because I am in a position where I have the slack to be able to do that, and that's the least that I owe to humanity as a whole. That's the I'm an overthinker. I think deeply, I feel deeply. Everything is very deep for me.
How old were you when you had these first?
Probably started at 7.
Yeah, great. Yeah. I was very into Robin Hood at the time.
I think coming from that sort of overthinking background, that I care about doing the most good. How can I help people? And then realizing that existential risk, I came across that at high school. One of my physics teachers, he ran a club at school where we discussed similar things. And then just realizing that there aren't that many people working on this. It's neglected, but it could have such high consequences that extras seem important to work on, but they're not mainstream at the moment. And so if nobody else is, then why not me? if not me, then who? I think that was the real hook, that I could actually have a lot of impact in this field right now. And it is a field which attracts many people who take things deeply and seriously, which is something that I love in my own life, that you should, feel deeply, do everything to the sort of most intense that you can, sort of vibe.
Yeah.
And I think X risk as a field has always had that this is real, the stakes are real. And I think that combined with my personal worldview, that I want to have impact, help as many people as I can.
Yeah.
What we do right now could actually be relevant for generations to come.
Yeah.
That this is really in our hands. We can make a difference. I think the combination of the community being what it is and my own personal motivations means that I'm hooked for life.
Cool. Yeah, I love that, like the sincerity and the sense of responsibility. What was the first thing?
I read a bunch of things on the Atlantic and the Vox.
Oh, right.
And so I used to read that stuff a lot, and I thought they were quite compelling. I also happened to meet someone on Twitter who, when I was just finishing my master's, they were just starting a research project oriented towards this. So I've always wanted to be a researcher, sort of an academic, but I guess the decisions on what kinds of questions to research were more driven by, well, what's going to make me a famous academic? But then these other framework seemed like better, more rational, more, I mean, I'm not saying it's perfectly rational, but it just seemed like more objective than the one I was using. So, and that's how I got involved in it. I have to say as well, though, I also just like interesting questions, and there's a bunch of interesting questions there. So it's not. I don't think it's all entirely impact oriented. I think it's also like, oh, that's a really interesting question. It's a hard question. So
what are some examples of that? Like, what's currently noodling you?
Yeah. Okay. So for now, for example, I'm curious about like in what circumstances, what sort of framework should be used to decide to integrate like a very agentic AI system into an important critical infrastructure, like I guess the power grid.
Right.
So how exactly should that decision be made in a society that calls itself democratic?
So this would be an AI system that could like take decisions on its own, make its own mind up. So I'm using some vague language.
Sorry, I should have said that. Yeah, exactly. So like, what sort of framework should be used to decide that question? That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of things that attracted me to the field. Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. So I mean, some of this can be quite depressing, right? So we're like, ultimately what we're talking about here is like maybe billions of people dying, like societal collapse, big pandemics, nuclear war, climate change, some really catastrophic kind of AI disaster, super volcanoes, asteroids, go on and on and on. The alien invasion, of course, and the religious rapture. So I mean, like, I think the question I most often get asked by people is like, how are you and all your colleagues not like depressed all the time? How do you why are you working on this really scary, awful stuff? Yeah. So a kind of flip side to the what makes you hopeful. What kind of doesn't drive you into feeling very depressed about all these like very scary, horrible things?
I figured this out quite early actually.
Okay, right.
I think I realized that I just need to have enough time away from people working on these questions, because they talk a lot about this stuff and it's, as you said, sad. So I spend a lot of time just hanging out with people who don't talk about this stuff at all. And
very wise.
Yeah, and they don't ask me about this stuff, so it's great. That's the solution that seems to work for me, because I remember when ChatGPT arrived, and I really had this sense of dread. yeah, but then I just started hanging out again with people who were not talking about this, and I felt better. Yeah.
So getting onto Twitter can be helpful, but also getting off Twitter
Yeah.
also helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my answer is very emotion driven, in case if you haven't caught the vibe yet. I'm a very emotional human. And I think I can't afford to feel hopeless. Because if we get into that, then there's no way out of that. And as an engineer, I'm somebody who is very much that, okay, there's a problem, we can break this down, break it into components, see who can figure out what, build a team around it, and we can fix it. Like, as an engineer, my instinct is that we can fix a system. And so when you come from that perspective, then yes, when GPT-5 will eventually drop, I'll probably go underground for at least a few days. But as a whole, humanity is something very special. What makes us human is worth preserving. And when the stakes are that high, I cannot afford to feel hopeless, because there aren't that many other people in the field right now to be able to fill the space that will open up if I am sat in my room crying, thinking that we are all going to die.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few days like that. So you both mentioned this. Was GPT-4 like a big moment for both of you? Like, so that this is like about a year ago, right? About last March. Was that a big moment? Was that a bit of a like a shock? You mentioned. I mean, you said dread.
Yeah, it definitely was for me.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I guess it was like, oh damn, it can do all these things. What's to say they can't push it farther and farther? Yeah, it was. I definitely felt very nervous about it. Maybe also just everybody in my spaces was nervous, so maybe that was another reason I was very nervous about it. Yeah.
I think it just felt too real. I think before GPT 3.5, ChatGPT, AI X risk felt almost abstract in some sense that, okay, we still have a lot more steps to go before we get there. But I think when GPT-4 came around, it just felt like they could keep doing this again and again, and maybe get to a point where that becomes a real scenario. And so I think having that product, that tangible thing, that I can see this now, I can see that it is probably smarter than some of the humans on the planet already. And then that sense of this is getting real, this is no longer a far-fetched future scenario, it just made it feel a lot more tangible.
So it's something about like just seeing the rate of progress and realizing where we are on the kind of exponential curve or something. Yeah.
I think GPT 3.5 still didn't feel that because it was the first data point. But then seeing the jump happen from 3.5 to 4 and realizing that this is not, it hasn't taken them that long to get to this stage. And now they're pouring even more resources into it, which does not bode well for the speed of the curve.
Did you, I mean, that kind of like, seeing where the exponential is going, did you both have, what was your experience of the kind of early days of the pandemic? Was it kind of something similar? Like, if you were already familiar a little bit with kind of, global catastrophic biological risk, did you have a kind of similar feeling? Yeah, what was your experiences of that? I mean, and also like, your response was also to, kind of actually like double down. Yeah, so I'm just interested in what your experiences were there.
The pandemic, I was shocked. I guess I thought, I just never thought maybe that there'd be this kind of disease again. Seemed like the most I'd seen was Ebola, and I think bird flu at some point, but that was fairly small scale. But I hadn't actually gotten in deep into the field by the time the pandemic was happening. I got in maybe a year after. But I was mostly just shocked that this number of people. I think Italy was one of the like, oh, that's a lot of people. So that's what I'd say about the pandemic. But certainly, in terms of biorisk, there's no doubt it made biorisk, the risk from biological stuff, really real in my mind.
I think it was the flip side for me in terms of it made me feel hopeful about X-Risk. This seems quite not intuitive, but the pandemic really had a global response. We did coordinate on a global scale. We vaccinated. Humanity turned it around as far. It could have been a lot better, right? Every time there are improvements that you could have made in hindsight. But at the time, just seeing that, okay, borders locked, we are locking down, and not all decisions were correct. But as a human race, we really rose up to the challenge that this is a global thing. If even one country doesn't do what they should be doing, it's going to get a lot worse because there are going to be variants and it's going to mutate. But as a whole, we coordinated and we managed to suppress COVID. Maybe not optimally, but we still managed to do it. And I think that gave me hope that if we can do this for bio, then maybe there's hope for everything else.
You're a glass half full person, but it is whether you look at the gap between how bad things could have got and how we did, and then where we should have been or something, and where we actually were up. It's which one do you kind of focus on? Have you noticed? So, and then also working with the fellows, do people refer to these kind of big moments, the Sputnik moment of GPT-4 or the pandemic or the Ukraine invasion and kind of nuclear? Is that what's kind of do people talk about that, or is it much more? Is it kind of these big changes like that, or is it much more just reading things, kind of getting persuaded? Is it more of a kind of shock or more of these abstract arguments? I'd be what's your kind of vague impression from people you've spoken to?
I think I don't really have a vague sort of bird's eye view on this, but it depends on whether someone's motivations for working on it are rational or emotional. I think these big moments are really good for catching that emotional response, that you feel it, that you feel that this is big stakes. But sometimes, people find things interesting and they want to work on problems. And I think at ERA, we've had people from both the buckets. I don't have a good intuition for what the split is on that front.
Probably something similar. I mean, the more rational people are persuaded by the on-paper arguments, then I think, there's one group like that, just persuaded by the on-paper arguments and how well they line up when questioned. But then maybe the other group is persuaded-ish with the on-paper arguments, but the real stuff that persuades them is seeing real examples of, hey, here's an AI, look at what it can do. And then saying, oh, okay, so that's what I think.
Where's the trend line going? I mean, I think I had a similar thing with, Oppenheimer, the film, really got to me, and because I, worked on nuclear-related issues for a while and kind of knew abstractly the argument for nuclear war, nuclear winter, mass starvation, blah, blah, blah. But then, something about the last scene just let me, I was in absolute floods of tears. Couldn't get out of my seat. Because, there's something about the kind of, it's different parts of our brain or something, and sparking both of them. I'd be interested in kind of where, you both talked about how this is kind of quite still a young field, the field of global catastrophic risk and existential risk. Where do you think, I'd be interested in hearing your views on where you think it's going and what it's missing in terms of people experience, skills. I'd be just interested in any views the two of you have on that.
There's someone who many people here probably know called Gideon Futterman. I think he's really great. I mean, he's done some really interesting thinking on this question. So I'm talking about things that I heard from him, which were quite convincing in many ways. I think it looks like it's going to expand as a kind of field of study. In terms of what's needed, I mean, I think it would probably help a lot if there's more funding streams. More places where people who want to work on this field can go to get support. I think it would also help if I guess, academic institutions. As I know, CFI has already sort of started a program like this. AI ethics.
Thanks for allowing us to mention that. Yeah, so we've, if you haven't heard enough about applications, there's the Center for the Future of Intelligence, which is our sister center, has a master's program on on AI governance and ethics. We're just in the first year, and we're going to be doing another one next year. So apply now, and we hope to soon be doing one on global catastrophic risk with CSER. So master's programs as well as fellowships coming down the track. What kind of where do you see the field going, and where do you think we need different kinds of experience and skills?
I think in terms of where the field is going, AI has made X risk seem a lot more real to the mainstream crowd than it has been before, because it feels real now. They see what GPT-4 can do, and they can imagine a world where it can be X risk. So I do agree with Cecil that it's going to expand as a field. But in terms of, for example, at ERA, one thing that I've really been trying to do is try to get people from different countries, and especially sort of women as well, involved in X risk, because it is not the diversity on that front is not as great as it could be. And I think last year's program was quite proud that we had a 50-50 gender ratio almost, which was an insane achievement when I look back on that. But trying to get more voices around the table who can build different perspectives and so just tease out the nuances of maybe there's a different way of looking at this, right? Or maybe there's some cultures which just look at things differently, that bring out a different solution space that we currently don't have. So maybe that's something that we need to work on more as in terms of what's missing. In terms of skill sets and experiences, I think we don't have enough personal narratives in X risk, which is, this event is great, but enough stories of people who have just sort of started from somewhere and are working on this. And then that narrative which makes it real that you could also be doing this. I think X risk as a field is very similar to a lot of other fields. It does not have any special that you need to be good at forecasting thing, right? Like we do have a space for those people, but that's not the expectation for everyone. And no matter what your skill set is, you can still come into the field and make a meaningful difference because the field is still relatively small and you can have a high upside even if you put out a little bit of what you're doing. So I think, but to make that happen, to give people that motivation, we need narratives around this is impactful, or like this is the story for why you should be doing it. As an everyday human, this is how you can contribute to this field. Because I genuinely think that anyone can in some capacity or the other. It's just about making the space for people to come in and fill that.
I think that's really powerful. And it reminds me of talking to Lord Martin Rees, who's been a supporter of ERA and helped found CSER. Talking to him about his experience, because now he's this, Astronomer Royal, former president of the Royal Society and so on. But back in the 70s, when he first started getting interested in a lot of these kind of issues of nuclear weapons and things like that, he looked to the previous generation of kind of scientists who had been involved in setting up things like the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists in the 50s, kind of after the war. And that just felt like, I remember when he first said that to me and feeling like very motivated by that and thinking like, oh yeah, it's not this just like this generation has just come up with this idea of like, we should be reducing these large risks to society. It's been this like continual effort, and we're like, we can aspire to be to help kind of pick up the baton and kind of carry it on and pass it on to future generations. I mean, in a very narrow sense in the field, and then obviously in the much like wider sense that you both talked about. Maybe it'd be a good time to open for questions.
Is that AI? Should we trust AI or human behavior more when we look at the reality going on all around the world?
Yeah. Okay. So trust AI or human behavior. I mean, so so I think this is something that some people have said, right? Should we fear more artificial intelligence or human stupidity. Yeah, kind of interesting if you've got any views on that.
Well, I mean, for now, it's the human beings, right? But yeah, for now, I guess it's the human beings because we haven't reached there yet. We haven't got to, I guess, the really, really dangerous AI yet. Yeah, for now.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, those two aren't as decoupled as it's not, a sort of binary choice between human stupidity versus AI in the sense that one thing makes the other worse along some dimensions or something. But I think we aren't in the phase similar to what Cecil said, where AI is the real risk. Currently, it is humans who are using AI and sort of misuse and things like that. But the worry is that we will get to a stage where that equation flips. But as of now, it's probably human stupidity more than just AI doing bad things by itself.
There's an argument that we. Oh, sorry, we got another question.
Oh, he had his hand up.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't want to interrupt you. You go ahead.
No. What was I going to say? Basically, there's this argument that at least when people mess up, we know kind of what the range of that is. We know kind of the distribution of they mess up in these ways and these stupid ways and these ways. Whereas AI can mess up in these brand new, completely strange, bizarre alien ways that we just don't don't expect at all. Stuart Russell talks about, you say to your helper AI, oh, go and make me some food, and it puts the cat in the microwave. We're just that's not a mistake that, humans make a lot of mistakes. They probably wouldn't make that one. But yeah, sorry, you have a question.
I'm just interested to know whether any of your fellows, are any of them doing research on acceleration risk, the challenge that the actual accelerating rate of development of AI and other technologies is so rapid that our ability to keep up, not only legislatively, but also in terms of scientists just keeping up with the body of knowledge, we're getting left behind before the consequences work themselves out.
Yeah, I cannot remember off the top of my head if we have had fellows in the past, but in fact, I think CSER really looks at a systemic approach of risk, that risk isn't really separate hazards, but it's a sort of systemic risk. And I think maybe that framework is better to think this through than looking at specific sort of hazards, because the thing about risk is that increase in AI advancements is also going to accelerate other risks. And so it just has cascading effects throughout the system. So maybe, Haydn, maybe you have better thoughts on this than I do.
No. That's right. So there's a term in law, right, where it's dilemma where things are, it's the pacing problem or something? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the term.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I was just going to say actually that I think we've had people be 2 or 3 who have worked on problems around how do you regulate a technology that's that way, that's doing this, that's moving this fast in a way that you can't keep up. And essentially the project looks something like, okay, try and find comparators and then try and figure out how those ones were, how human beings figured out those ones, and then try and lift lessons for this kind of tech. So I guess it's...
What's some examples of those comparators?
Electricity
or something? Or?
Yeah, so for example, the steam engine, although it's imperfect, obviously. That's the problem with all the comparators, right? They're all imperfect in terms of what the situation with AI right now.
Yeah.
But that's something close to what he said. But in terms of what exactly, just the very philosophical question of acceleration and what. Then no one in my group has done this. So they mostly look at, okay, what can we do about a technology that is this fast and that kind of thing. Yeah.
On the comparison thing, Matthias Maas, who's a researcher now in Copenhagen, has this paper on AI analogies, so different analogies for AI, and he's counted up, I think, something like 55 And it's like the Industrial Revolution, steam engine, fire, fungi, God, golems, just the internal combustion engine, like nuclear weapons. And it's like, if you have to come up with 55 different ones, it's like, maybe it's just its own thing that we just need to grapple with.
Yeah, it's really tough.
With respect to the question, the year is 2030. Where are 2024's ILINA and ERA fellows? What are they doing? How are they making a difference?
It's a good one. Yeah. Okay.
They're still alive. That's the big thing.
Important. I have to be really clear-eyed about this. I think half of them would be doing X-risk work. I think a quarter might do X-risk work. Yeah, the other ones never starting. So where will they be exactly? That's a good question. I think some may be in Oxford, some may be in Cambridge, some hopefully will remain in Nairobi and do it from there. In research institutions, probably. Yeah, I think that's how I see it playing out. Or some, I think a good number will be combining interests. So they're like a refugee law researcher, but also interested in AI X-risk. So they've been hired in universities as refugee law researchers, but alongside that, they research AI X-risk. I think that's how, in my mind, it looks like it will play out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for ERA fellows, it's the number of people working on X-risk is probably slightly higher. Like I would expect maybe 60 to 75% to still be working on X-risk. We already had some drop-off. I do try to keep track of this. I haven't checked recently. But I think, where they will be, that's a really interesting question that I don't have a clear-cut answer to, just because every single ERA fellow looks so different from another. Like there are people who are still doing their undergraduate degrees who did ERA maybe 1 or 2 years back. I don't know what they will do next. Maybe they'll do a PhD, they'll go into research, maybe they go into entrepreneurship. But the hope is that they will play an active role in shaping the conversations in X-risk in some way or the other, and actually contribute my vision is thought leadership, and trying to cultivate the generation of thought leaders who will be leading the conversations by then. So that's a high-level aspiration, but I will come back to you in 2030 on that one.
Some of these issues like AI, and I could imagine coming up with some ideas to mitigate the risk, but then you have to get them put into practice, not just by this government, but potentially every government and institution. I wonder if that's something that you're looking at, how to get ideas into practice, and if there are any successes in that area.
That's something the people I work with are very interested in. Part of the challenge though is just how to study something like that. It's like the methods that you should use to figure out something like that. That's really hard. Like, how do you figure out how we started making progress on climate change, and like things started being put into practice. So actually, in my opinion, that's part of it. Like, there are people interested and there are people doing this, but the big challenge is to come up with a very convincing methodology that produces compelling results.
Yeah, I think especially in AI, there have already been steps in that direction. For example, the UK AI Safety Task Force in the government, actually getting into a room with people who can call these shots and make the decisions is the first step, and probably one of the biggest hurdles to get over. And in the UK, at least, we have this task force now. We had the UK AI Safety Summit last year that you may have heard of. So at least around AI, these conversations are starting to take place behind closed doors now. But it's just about building out that into a more global sort of governance So I haven't thought about this as much personally, but I know that there are people like Claire, who was an ERA fellow, who are thinking about these sort of global, how can we regulate AI sort of questions.
But I was interested in that both of you, when you said, like, where do you see the fellows going? It was mostly like kind of research, thought leadership, academia. I was wondering whether either of you would be like, oh yeah, we're going to have an MP. Like we're going to, you know, like there's going to be like an ERA fellow prime minister or whatever. Yeah. With an eye on the time, let's do one more plug. How do people apply to the programs?
Yeah, so you can just Google erafellowship.org, and the website should hopefully have everything. If it doesn't, come find me in Cambridge.
Same. ILINA program, and it'll come up.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay, and then I'll do our own little plug. The Centre for the Study of Existential Risk. We're doing a conference later this year, and the call for papers has just gone up on our website, and it's going to be very open. It's going to be covering 4 or 5 different topics, and you can send in an abstract, and it'll get, you know, reviewed and so on, and you could present at our conference later this year. So please do consider, if you're a student applying for the fellowships, and at whatever career level you're at, considering sending an abstract. So let's thank Nandini and Cecil so much. Thank you very much.